everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Branding and the Beast, a podcast that looks at the best branding through words and design. My name is Sean Bernstein of the Right Stuff Agency, and my co-host.
Alicia Disantis of 38th and KIP Design and Marketing.
Alicia and I are just talking off mic about what a fantastic week we are both having, which is very exciting news.
Yeah, I'm telling you, as a small business owner, when it rains, it pours. It's just hustling, It's going to be a good autumn, I think. It's going to be a good autumn.
I'm excited for it. I was saying to someone this week that, it sounds silly, but I think that looking busy is one of the precursors to being busy. And, we'll talk about that in the social media context, but honestly, sort of keeping your business prominent and out there and on top of people's minds, which, involves putting in a lot of content and makes you look really busy, will then lead to actually being that busy. And even if you're busy already and you can afford to be busier, it just keeps coming through. So it's an amazing tool.
Yep. It's like the old manila folder uh, uh, action where you just walk around the office with the manila folder and you don't actually do any work and everyone thinks you're busy because you're walking around with that folder.
There's that Seinfeld episode where Kramer accidentally winds up working at a large corporation, but really doesn't have a job or no clue what he's doing.
Yes.
He's just
And the
kind of
one,
there.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, no,
I'm
no, no.
excited talking about Seinfeld, or the one where George has that job and he leaves his car there. So they
Yeah,
think that he is always there early and always stays late.
he's at the Yankees, just leaves his car. Brilliant. So yeah, look busy, and you will be busy. I think it's a law of attraction.
Yep.
So I wanted to do this episode as a kind of a social media part two. Because the last episode, if you listened to that already, we had our wonderful guest Charlie, who is phenomenal and has this amazing following. If you're already following Did You Drool, you've seen it. If you're not, follow her now. She's done amazing work. The challenge, though, that I think some small business owners listening might run into is that she has sort of done a uh, very niche kind of field in a set geographic area. Um, that she's built up. Doing these food reviews, and it's wonderful. But the reality, and so she's had I think about 17,000 followers, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
More than that, I
Wh-
think. Almost 20. Almost 20.
Okay, so yeah, probably close to 20, which is great. But the reality of the small business is that they might not be looking at 20,000 followers, especially if they're, a local business. Success for them might look like 2,000 followers or 1,000 or 1,500. But, those then become loyal followers that really stick with their brand and, that are enough to sustain their business well. If they're not, in a big city, or they're not looking to go, nationwide or North America wide or even global, then success is a very different picture. So I wanted to make sure that we had kind of a voice talking about social media in the small business context.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, Sean. And especially with, certain industries just lend themselves better to a visual consumption, like food, for example, or consumer packaged goods. But what if you have a more esoteric kind of like B2B um, uh, structure where it's hard to visualize? You don't have sexy images coming in all the time of being a strategic planner or working on, organizational management or all these different things. You know what I mean?
That's kind of one of the challenges. And I mean, Charlie, aside from being incredibly polished, makes food look sexy. Like that food is, you look at all those pictures and go, oh my God, I want to eat now. But if you are a small town law firm or an electrician, or your business is not inherently, it's either service based or just not inherently sexy. How do you gain that traction on social media? What do you do to really kind of make that uptick?
Exactly. And I'm excited to hear your strategy because I think we are equally each other's biggest fangirls, where we are constantly And that's something I'll get to later. I think there's a strategy in that. But I want you to go ahead and share your strategy and what you're doing with the Right Stuff agency.
Sure, I'm glad to, because my strategy is a little lackluster is the wrong word, but could probably use a lift. It's very sort of self-driven, by which I mean it's driven by my brilliant wife, who has a much better eye for this sort of thing than I do, admittedly. And so she is the one who spends time in Canva doing great designs and really polished images. And she's the one who kind of puts. I'm the wordsmith, so I can write a great caption. But she's the one who really kind of is helps out with the accompanying visual, which is so helpful. But I had a crazy social media experience this week, and this will obviously come out sometime later. But I did a video for my company with a local production studio. They had actually worked with a client of mine previously, and I love their work, and I'm friends with the guys. To do like a walk and talk intro video to kind of explain what I do, and it has been phenomenal on social media. It's really sort of the power of that visual storytelling, where I'm a storyteller in words, but adding that sort of live video element, for example, has just gone far beyond my wildest dreams. I won't talk about numbers because it's a little bit of the past at this point. It's still climbing, but it's gone all over the world, and I am speechless at how effective that's been as a tool.
Everyone wants to see your beautiful face.
Aww, that's why we're a video podcast.
I know. That's awesome. And the video was very well done. Um, and I think there's something to be said about very polished uh, content, spending the money and the effort to make it, like a branding video or a brand story. But there's also just be something to be said about just the kind of crappy stuff you throw together that goes viral, or whatever viral means in your terms. And people love it. That's the beauty of the world we're living in right now with social, is that the sophisticated and the amateur almost have an equal playing field.
I'm actually doing a piece for them, so I'm doing some back and forth work with the production guys, and we're going to do some blogs and newsletters. And one of the pieces is, when is bad video okay?
Oh, I love that.
Because they do really good polished video. But if you're going to be on TikTok, or you're going to be, just sort of shooting reels while you do a handheld walk and talk, it's not going to be a studio polished production. And so, when is bad video okay? When is it not okay? And what are some tips to make even bad video that little bit better?
Oh, I absolutely love that. That's I'll be eager to read that.
I'll send it to you when it's done.
I love that. So I'll tell you about what I've been doing lately. I've completely kind of rehashed my social, or my Instagram strategy at least. And I actually have a dedicated Monday through Friday calendar now. I have a social media calendar. Yes, thank you. It only took 13 years of being in business. And
Good for you.
so what it allows me to do is that, and this is the first tip I would give as a small business owner, is it allows you to take the time to think about what you want to talk about all week and not be rushed every day when you have so much else going on. Uh, the other thing I started doing is an educational branding tips Tuesday, and it's a minute and a half to 2 minutes of purely educational content. And I repost on LinkedIn, uh, and I like that because it forces me to think about what is important to people right now. So the third thing I've been doing is posting inspirational content, and I found this to be uh, far and away the most engaging content based on my following. So I'll post reels of books that have been very important to me throughout my creative career. So like Roger Dean, um, Rodney Matthews, a lot of these sci-fi fantasy artists. Also logo inspiration, um, just various books I have around the house that I use when I need a creative push, and people love that stuff. So it provides insight into my uh, the way I work and my strategy and my background. And I like that because it shows a more well-rounded individual as a small business owner, not just some flat. agency founder that you don't really know much about them.
It speaks towards that authenticity point, right? People want to get to know you, and we are entrepreneurs, we are solopreneurs, we are our brand. And, we talked about this with Jose. It's more than just us, but it's also just us. And so letting
Exactly.
that authenticity and kind of letting someone in makes you a lot more real than some of your competition.
Exactly. Exactly. Right on. Well, I'm stoked to hear what Melanie has to say because she does this for a living, and you know she's made a name for herself. So eager to talk with her.
Yeah, let's bring her on in. So, we want to welcome our amazing guest for this episode, Melanie Pangan from RainSpark Media in Whitby. Uh, I happen to know Mel quite well, and she's a close personal friend and colleague. So, I'm going to do her bio off the cuff, even though she sent me a fairly long one. I am throwing that out the window, and I can tell you that Melanie started her business in November of 2019 after coming out of 20 years of really high end corporate world experience, including everything from SiriusXM, Bell. Where else was she? Okay, now I'm gonna actually turn back to the bio. Oh, come on.
The pride before the fall.
Medcan. I could list them off if I really open up her LinkedIn, but
See how I'm not
it's
helping you?
no, I just want to see. You want to see if I can do it. Dyson, she's worked around the world and knows the corporate world and big business inside and out. And then decided to turn her lens and focus on small business and really helping small businesses grow and succeed the same way as she had in the corporate world. So she's had about 3 years now, almost 3 years in RainSpark Media, and it has just blown up. It has absolutely taken over Durham region where we both live. She is the uh, head right now of Shop Where You Live, which is an amazing program in Durham promoting local businesses. She is truly the queen of local social media, and we are lucky to have the time with her today. So, how did I do, Melody?
You did really well. And you know what? I should be thanking you guys. I really appreciate this time with you.
We're thrilled to have you here. It's always fun talking to great guests, and I told you a little bit about why I wanted to do this episode, and I was talking about it in the intro. We had an amazing social media person on our previous episode, but she is in a very different social world. She is a Chicago. Do they call them food bloggers still if it's social? I don't quite know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so. Food
yeah, so
blogger, foodie. Like,
she's a local foodie in the Chicago scene and has this amazing Instagram presence, and has like 20,000 followers. But everything there is sexy. I mean, it's sexy pictures of burgers and pizza and these amazing high quality restaurant dishes. And the username, forgive me, is Did You Drool? And yes, you look at her pictures, you will. But the reality is that success for a small business on social media can look very different. It might not be 20,000 followers, it might be 1,000 or 2,000. And it's not always going to be the sexiest pictures, it's not always going to be the sexiest topic matter. So, how do you stand out and how do you sort of, define success and reach for success as a small business running social media?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great comparison. She is in a very different space than the clients that we do marketing for. We work with clients who are in their growth phase, and we really do find their story. And quite often, when I sit down with prospective clients, not to take your line, Sean, um, we everyone does have a story, and we're going to tell the story visually through their social media. And quite often, and this might be even a Canadian thing, I think, but everyone seems to underestimate the amazing work that they do every day, whether they're an electrician, whether they're a plumber, whether they're a commercial cleaning team, whether they're a lawyer. They all sort of underestimate how they contribute to the community and their expertise and their reputation that they built. So I always find it really interesting to sit down with them, and to have that discussion. And a part of our process is quite detailed onboarding. And it really does make them think of their business differently. There hasn't been one person yet that has sailed through our onboarding, which is exactly the intention of why we set it up the way we do, because it really is about how do we understand your story? How do we build the framework that we're going to tell your story in pictures and in small captions? And who is your audience? And who is your ideal client? Because everything revolves around who the audience is and who the ideal client is, because we want to attract them not just to the one post, but get them interested to go take a look at the rest of the feed, probably like the account and follow, and maybe even publicly comment. So it's very different than super sexy, drool worthy food pictures, which there's always a common denominator of everyone that loves looking at that. But to really pull someone into maybe um, a residential plumber and to get them to be interested in what they do and their expertise and to showcase them as an expert in their field and the full array of what they do, that often is very difficult, but it's something that we're really good at. And again, digging into that audience, can't tell you how many times we've started the conversation with a prospective client and they actually can't tell me who their client is, who their ideal client is. They tell me everyone is. So it's interesting because I don't tell them that you're going to turn away people if they don't fall into the ideal client definition. It's just that you need to know who you're marketing to.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny you mentioned that because I just had a branding tips Tuesday 2 days ago that talked about who is your who's your client, who's your ideal
Mm-hmm.
audience, and how to
Mm-hmm.
how to identify them. It is, in my experience, one of the most under acknowledged questions within marketing and branding.
Yeah, and you got that is the foundation. Because if you don't know that, you can't build the graphics that are going to attract that audience. You can't speak the language correctly in the captions that you write, and you certainly are not going to have a hashtag strategy that finds where those people hang out online. And so, Sean, you touched on it a little bit about 20,000 followers, 100,000 followers, breaking the internet. There's that is certainly some people's goals. And for me, it's funny when I'm talking to a prospective client, if there's any indication that that's what they want, I actually won't work with them. And I'll tell you a little bit about that because that might be a little bit surprising. But my goal in my business is to help businesses get in front of the audience that are most likely to be customers for them or the audience that has already been customers for them and to remind them constantly about that business. So I want people to go in and spend their money at that company. And so if you are targeting a global audience, that's not going to happen unless you can ship globally, which most of my clients don't. And the majority of people I interact with don't have a global shipping setup. So they really do need to understand, how do I get people in the door and how can people purchase? So if that is the intent of their marketing, I'm happy to help them. If they're going for break the internet stuff or 100,000 and that vanity number of followers is what's really behind everything they're doing, quite often they want to have me get really risky with the kind of marketing we do. And I know because I've been in corporate life that risk, you have to weigh out the risk and the benefit, but I'm talking risky marketing that can break the internet. So I don't want them going in that direction because their business is too important. They're too important in the community. And it's the wrong North Star to be focused on. So if they want to do that personally, I say go to it. Let's not partner. Go do your thing, break the internet. But if they actually want to drive business into their business and they want to attract new customers to their business and they want to dominate their industry, then I'm a great person to talk to and they can work with me in my business.
It's a great point. No one who's going to use the electrician that you're working with is going to care that they have 10,000 followers in Malaysia. The electrician shouldn't care either. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not a number that makes any sense. There's no real tangible benefit there. Versus, we're in a region of a couple 100,000 people, of several active business communities that you're involved with, and if that electrician picks up a couple thousand followers, let's say, if they're really doing well, of which couple dozen, couple hundred people start phoning, that's great success.
It
And there's
is.
no, that's the metric I would think, especially for our conversations, that is worth focusing on.
Right. But the challenge in that too, Sean, is let's say there's a local business that has, let's just say 30,000 followers. The challenge for the person looking at that social media account, they don't understand the analytics behind it. And quite often, the business owner doesn't either. So the only thing they really understand, because trust me, social media marketing, doing it well, is really complex. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But what people do know if they're on social media is followers is everything. And it isn't if they're not where you do business. So I constantly have that conversation with my clients about this isn't a vanity metric. This is one of several metrics that have to be looked at, like how often you get in front of the right audience, what's the engagement like on what we do, the consistency that we're delivering, brand recognition, brand recall, and quite often, and this is a hard one for people too. Um, People spend 3 to 5 hours a day on social media. And every time I say that number, people are like, are you kidding me? They do. And I can prove it because just pay attention to the world around you. The next time you're in line to get a coffee, what are the people all around you doing? Nobody's looking at each other to make small talk. They're scrolling. So they may be doing it in a very subconscious way, scrolling because it's a safety mechanism. It makes them comfortable in public situations. So they may not be stopping and reading one of the posts for your business, but their mind's eye has actually digested it. It's sunk into their subconscious. So all of that is a part of what we're doing, that you've got to be consistent, and you have to have brand consistency, voice consistency, and you need to be consistently posting to the right target audience if you want to have any success.
I am dying to know what your strategy is for um, industrial or mechanical services, like
Okay, so
plumbing.
let's just say that was your business and you came to me. So the very first thing we would do is I would dig into industrial mechanical services. I would say, who are your top clients today? And they may or may not be able to answer that, but we get down to that at some point in time very quickly. Who are your best customers? We get down to that answer very quickly. Who are the customers that make your life very easy to do your job every day? So I need to know that, because if I understand those three groups, I'm going to try to attract more of those people because we already know they're a proven method. So when I sit down and talk to maybe a business that is unsure, or they tell me about aspirational goals of the kind of clients that they want, it's going to be a much longer education play to try to get the awareness of a mechanical or industrial business. They have customers too. It's just understanding who the customers are and then figuring out where those folks hang out online. Because it might be another business, so it might be B2B, but the B2Bs have people working in them who are most likely, in my case, in Durham region. So then you start to think about the personas around that. What kind of cars do they drive? Where do they hang out on the weekends? What might be of interest? What are the top accounts that everyone seems to follow in Durham region? And then we do several hashtag strategies per client to try to get their social posts in front of their audience. So you might individually, I might have my own personal account, but I work for said industry that engages or does work with the industrial mechanical. So we go at it like multi-prong approach, trying to get the marketing in front of those individuals, and then in fact those companies. There's
Right
lots of
on.
research. That's why when I say it's really complex, quite often I get asked to teach social media, and I never do, and I never will, because I'll tell you why. I spend my full time week totally engrossed and in love in that space. My team's the same. I actually also give them 2 hours every 2 weeks to do research. And then we roundtable and share what we're seeing and what we're learning. So we have a bird's eye view, unlike the individual business or an individual. We have so many clients that we have a bird's eye view when something starts changing. Because guess what? Facebook, Instagram, Google Business, they don't tell you when things are going to change. They just change it. So we walk in the morning, but we have a bird's eye view across all of our clients to what those changes are, and we can navigate through them much quicker. And quite often, we usually have some sort of perspective that there's a change coming from some of the research that we're doing. So we spend a lot of hours in this space, and the strategy that we use is not something we can teach, because the average everyday business owner is not going to have the time. And when you do see the business owners out there that are doing videos that are like, oh, let's say a 1.5 minute video that's absolute perfection. I saw one this week more than one time that I really loved. Um, when you actually see it, it's flawless, it's beautiful, it's so compelling, and it's getting great impressions. But guess what? It didn't take a minute and a half to film it. It actually took a professional team, an amazing writer like Sean, somebody else who has screen background as well. So he's got some understanding on how to get in front of the camera. And even still, it can take hours. So you can't just pluck any client and put them in front of a camera. And it looks easy for the people who are posting the videos, but it can be hours of work that takes them out of the business and takes them out of what they do, which is actually shaking their moneymaker. That's how I always describe it to them. You need to shake your moneymaker in your business every day and leave the marketing to the professionals. Because otherwise, you're probably just doing something that's probably not really working, or you think it's working because your followers are going up around the globe and you're just attracting people from the UK and Australia who are never going to do business with you.
There's so many small businesses that I speak to where, just a sec. Sorry about that.
Bless
So
you.
many small businesses that I speak to where they tell me that, oh, their clients aren't on social, or, they don't want to bother with social media because their clients aren't there. No one's looking for them there. What is it in your view that prevents a lot of small business owners from getting on board with what is clearly a very fast moving popular trend, the social media?
Mm-hmm. That's an awesome question. The first one is fear. They don't understand it. Um, the second one is their own personal experiences with social media. So I'll give the example of when social media at its inception. We'll talk Facebook. Facebook was meant to be an online high school yearbook. That was essential. They never had the vision of where it's at today. So when it originally came out, it was this amazing place where people were like, oh my God, this is so cool. I can catch up with people I haven't seen in ages. And it quickly morphed into look at all our perfect lives. So the challenge is that people have a personal feeling towards social media that actually has zero weight on how you use it for your business. So they're tainted by the personal experience and sometimes it has to do with age. So for instance, there's different demographics for every single social media platform that you choose. And not every single one is applicable. So lots of talk about TikTok these days. But guess what? Now, TikTok is evolving very quickly, but their demographic is still super young. So, what I advise the plumber, the lawyer, the electrician, the commercial cleaning business to be on there, hey, it might be cute to have a TikTok video, but will it drive business today? Probably not. So, you have to really understand the platforms. And that can be overwhelming for people. When I say age, Instagram came out a number of years ago. Their demographics are changing as well. But this is a very fast-paced, changing part of marketing as new platforms come on. Not every platform is applicable. Not every platform should be used. So it can be overwhelming as well for people. And they're just not engaged with their marketing. They might be very old school in their thinking that bricks and mortar and somebody walking by their front door is everything, but it really isn't anymore. The competition that is bricks and mortar is not your competition anymore. It's a person who is in the pockets of the consumers where you live, where you do business, where people are on 3 to 5 hours a day. But people have a huge mental block because of the technology behind social media that they think, I don't get it. That's a common phrase, by the way. I don't get it. I hate social. I'm never on it. All of these things I hear on an ongoing basis. But if you can imagine when TV was created, the generation that thought, why would I ever sit down in front of this tube and watch something? It's similar in feel to that. Things evolve. This is the fastest, most changing part of marketing that they've seen in decades is social media marketing. It is where you're most relevant. It's where there's the most analytics. It is very complex. So, like, I spoke to somebody last week, and I think this is a great example. He said to me, I'd really like to pay the money to have a billboard at this intersection. And it's expensive to have a billboard. So why is he comfortable with that? So one location, people driving very fast, distracted at that, going by the billboard, but he feels comfortable that that's a really good marketing play. Why wouldn't you want to be instead spend less than that billboard, reach a much wider audience, and be in the pockets of them 3 to 5 hours a day showing up where they are researching, entertaining, where they're spending all their time. But there's a comfort level to go to billboards. There's a comfort level for some of the old school marketing that's just ingrained in them that it's safe and it produces.
I am just dying to ask, the examples that you've discussed so far have been based on regionality. And like, for example, I have a lot of clients that it's not regional at all, including myself. So I work internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and Sean is the same way. So what's your strategy when it's not based on regionality and services could be applied to any English speaking country?
Absolutely, same strategy. So, where today do you have the ideal customer? What country, what city? So we would go that route, and then we dig in further about the characteristics, and then research has to be done in that locale to figure out what hashtags are most relevant. So for instance, let's just say you say Kyoto, Japan. You're like, I've got, out of all my clients, for some reason, I have some English speaking segment out of Kyoto, Japan that loves to work with me. So we would say, okay, well, describe them to me. What do they buy from you? What do they love? How are they to work with? Have you met them on video? Are there any characteristic, like let's build a persona of who they are. And then you have to start researching in that country with the English hashtags where they might be hanging out online to be able to build those hashtag strategies to try to attract more people just like them. Same with the US. I had a prospective client come to me not too long ago. They wanted to do some work out of Florida. I would take the exact same approach. Is it all over the state? Is it a particular city? Is it a bunch of cities? Tell me more about these people that want to work with you. And so I can visualize where I can find them online. Am I going to be looking for the high-end car dealership hashtags and checking how their accounts are? Or do we think they're driving those cars? Do we think they golf? Do we think they're out on boats? Like, what are the great restaurants? What are the local hashtags that are really dominating? So a really good example that it does pivot away from the international scene, but you can see the strategy is exactly the same. It's not easy. It takes time to dig in and build these things and do the research. But for instance, in Whitby, Sean and I just talked about it this week. There is a Whitby, UK. I reside in
Mhm.
Whitby. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to hashtag Whitby on everything because that's where I am. You have to actually check because it's actually Whitby ON you need to be hashtagging. Because if you do hashtag Whitby, you're actually just showing Whitby UK everything about your business. Same with Durham. So when we're talking amongst ourselves in Durham region, we might say, yeah, I live in Durham. Durham's home. But technically it's Durham region. So if you use just hashtag Durham, you're going to fall into North Carolina and Durham, Ontario. And they're two very different places in where you
Very,
do business.
very different.
Yeah.
So you're mentioning a lot restaurants and where people hang out. How does that specifically apply to a hashtag strategy? Would you hashtag those locales where you're?
No, I would go into who's following them and try to
Ah,
identify
I see.
people to start following for that client. And I would follow, let's just say it's BMW Durham, North Carolina. I would then follow Durham, North Carolina for that client's account. Because if I know people who might be driving a BMW in Durham, North Carolina, might be a good client for my customer, you got to do the full circle.
That's smart. That's a really smart take. Thank you so much, Melanie, for spending the time with us and for taking us to school when it comes to social. There's some invaluable takeaways here. I think the episode is now called "Shake Your Money Maker," so I'll make sure that we change that when we do our promotions.
I
But
love it.
thank you, thank you, thank you. This was fantastic. Beauty. Okay, so this episode is now called "Shake Your Money Maker." Can we license the
Yeah,
song? Do we have the money?
I'm thinking of that Rump Shaker song from the early 90s.
Shake,
You know what I'm
shake,
talking
shake
about?
your money maker. Yeah, no,
Uh,
I think we can. I mean, I don't want to get us in trouble, but if we could try to work it in somewhere.
get us in trouble. Who's gonna get us?
Who's
How are we gonna
listening
get in
enough to
trouble?
sue us?
Who's the We don't have any sponsors.
If we
Who's
get
it?
sued, that means that we have a listener. I think that's a sign of success.
um, I love the I love both these episodes with the combination of Melanie and Charlie because both so successful but so different.
Yeah.
And coming from, I think there's a lot of similarities in the strategy. Uh, the one the one similarity that's really uh, seems to be strong is consistency. Both of them talked quite a bit about consistency in your strategy.
Having a real professional and consistent approach, I think, is key. And I've been a culprit of this myself. It's a challenge, and if it doesn't come naturally to you, it's a real challenge because you got to push yourself some time. But it is worthwhile to really build up that presence. And it's such a simple and straightforward way to do it.
Yep. And we didn't have time to get into it, but I would challenge her approach to having the polish, having to have things very polished and the amount of work that goes into something that would be a very successful uh, component of your brand strategy. I think of the ocean spray skateboarder guy
Mm.
and how huge that was for ocean spray and for Fleetwood Mac. And that was probably the most unpolished video you could ever imagine. I mean, just some cool dude riding a skateboard drinking ocean spray, you
You
know?
never know when something's going to break the internet, right? Like you never know when something's going to go viral. And look at the memes that are based off stupid bad photos that explode things. So sometimes there's a lot of flukes. I don't know if the ocean spray thing was a fluke or what have you. It's hard to say.
Exactly. I just wouldn't, I would caution people not to feel the pressure to be so perfect that, if you're just starting out and you don't have the money to spend on a social media agency, um, there's still something to say in doing it yourself on a scrappy budget in order to get there. It's not all or nothing.
No, it can be a place to start. We may have different views. One of the things though that I think is sort of paramount is if you're going to do it yourself, put some effort into at least trying to do it right. Have some good lighting. Have something of a clean background. There are little things that even with very little money you can do. For your photos, make them somewhat interesting, somewhat appealing, somewhat on brand. I've seen enough bad, bad, bad social out there to realize, like, okay, you want to be careful that you're not harming your brand, and I think that can be a real danger.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a great point. And I think there's got to be a happy medium. And I think that medium changes every second based on our society, you know? It's we've never experienced anything quite like this before.
I actually, and it's a little converse to your point, but I liked her point about how be careful about pricing. Is if someone's way too cheap, and I think that goes for your work and for mine as well. Is if someone's going to bargain basement price you, be careful what you're getting.
Exactly. Exactly. And that goes back to what we talked about several episodes ago with growth with McDonald's
McDonald's, yep.
about um, understanding your worth and how much you should charge, not just for hour to hour talks, but everything that goes in to being a marketer and a writer. So I love it. I love how there's a thread of similarity across all these different people we're talking to.
It's we're looking at branding from every different angle we can. Anyway, let's let our poor listeners go back to their business. But we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Thank you to Melanie Pangan and RainSpark Media. You can find RainSpark, and I'm going to pull up, bear with me a second, her hashtag so that she can be part of this conversation, even though she's off the line. You can find RainSpark Marketing on Instagram or RainSpark Media Group on LinkedIn or Facebook, and Melanie Pangan, Pangan, on LinkedIn. So she is everywhere across channels and very easy to find. It's great to see some of the work that she does for clients.
Right on. Thanks for setting this set up, Sean.
Oh, my pleasure. You can find the Right Stuff Agency at just about every channel. I think I'm on TikTok. I don't know why, but I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all under the Right Stuff Agency, WRITE. And yourself, or 38?
38th and Kip. You can find me on LinkedIn, 38th and Kip Design. You can find me on Instagram, 38 and Kip underscore design. Or
Was
you
there
can
a
just
38th
Google
Kip
it.
that was taken?
You know, why don't you just go ahead and Google it? You can just
There you go.
Google 38th and Kip design, and I'll come up using those great Google algorithms.
There you go. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.